the lost episode of The Amazing World of Gumball that never aired. It was an ordinary Monday in Elmore when Gumball woke up to the sound of the school bell. Strange, he thought, since there were still 2 hours before classes started. Looking out the window, he saw it was still dark outside, and the clock showed 5:30 in the morning. Darwin was sleeping peacefully in his bowl, paying no attention to the sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Gumball tried to wake his brother, but Darwin only mumbled something unintelligible and turned to his other side. The bell continued to ring with monotonous persistence, and Gumball realized he could no longer ignore it. He got dressed and left the house, following the sound that led him straight to the school. Elmore Junior High stood in the pre-dawn darkness, but all the windows were brightly lit. Gumball approached the main entrance and found the door open. Inside, the corridors were empty, but the bell sounded even louder, echoing off the walls. He headed to his classroom where Miss Simeon usually taught. In the classroom sat all his classmates, Penny, Tobias, Banana Joe, Carmen, and the others. They sat at their desks in complete silence, staring straight ahead. Miss Simeon stood at the blackboard but didn't turn to Gumball when he entered. The bell suddenly stopped, and an oppressive silence fell over the classroom. "Sorry I'm late," said Gumball, but no one reacted. He approached his desk and sat next to Darwin, who was somehow already here, even though Gumball had left him sleeping at home. Darwin stared straight ahead like everyone else, his eyes wide open but seeming empty. Miss Simeon began the lesson, but her voice sounded strange, too slow and with an echo. She spoke about the importance of punctuality, about how important it was to come to school on time, and about the consequences of being late. Gumball tried to write something in his notebook, but found that his pen wouldn't write. He looked at his classmates' notebooks. They were all empty. The lesson went on endlessly. The clock on the wall showed the same time, 6:30 in the morning. Gumball began to understand that something was wrong. He tried to talk to Darwin, but he didn't answer. He tried to get Penny's attention, but she didn't even blink. Suddenly the bell rang for recess, and all the students simultaneously stood up and headed for the exit. Their movements were synchronized and mechanical, like marionettes. Gumball followed them into the corridor, where everyone positioned themselves in exactly the same positions as always during recess, but no one talked, laughed, or played. Gumball tried to leave the school, but found that all exits were locked. The windows wouldn't open either. He was trapped inside with his silent classmates. The bell for class rang again, and everyone returned to the classroom. Miss Simeon taught exactly the same lesson, word for word, and again the clock showed 6:30. This continued lesson after lesson, day after day. Gumball realized he was trapped in an endless loop of a school day, where time had stopped and everyone around him had turned into silent ghosts of themselves. He screamed, tried to break windows, begged someone to answer him, but nothing helped. Gradually, Gumball began to forget what his friends' voices sounded like, what the world outside school looked like, what freedom felt like. The only sound in his world remained the school bell, which rang with frightening regularity, marking the beginning and end of lessons that never truly ended. Eventually, Gumball sat at his desk and stopped moving. His eyes became as empty as the others. He no longer tried to speak or run away. He just sat and stared straight ahead, waiting for the bell that would ring forever, in a school that would never let its students go home. The lost episode of The Amazing World of Gumball that never aired. Gumball woke up in the morning and couldn't remember what he had for breakfast yesterday. It seemed strange to him, but nothing more. He went downstairs where Darwin was already waiting with toast. "Hi, Gumball. Do you remember how we played in the park yesterday?" Darwin asked. Gumball frowned. He didn't remember any game in the park. At school, Miss Simeon asked about homework she supposedly assigned last week. Gumball looked at his notebook. It was empty. Other students were actively discussing the assignment he couldn't remember at all. Penny approached him and said, "Gumball, did you forget about our date on Saturday?" He looked at her in confusion. What date? Day by day, Gumball noticed more and more memories disappearing from his mind. First small details, then entire days, then weeks. He tried writing everything down in a notebook, but when he opened it, the pages were blank, as if he had never written anything. Darwin showed him photos of their adventures together, but in the pictures, Gumball saw only blurred silhouettes instead of himself. His face was slowly disappearing from every photograph, as if he had never been there. Anais told stories about their family trips, but Gumball couldn't remember a single one. Nicole talked about his first steps, first words, but these memories dissolved into the fog of oblivion. Even Richard, usually absent-minded, remembered more about Gumball's life than he did himself. Gradually, Gumball realized the horrible truth. He wasn't just forgetting the past, he was disappearing from it. Every morning he woke up with fewer memories, less understanding of who he was. On the last day he remembered, Gumball looked in the mirror and saw only vague outlines. He no longer remembered his name, his family, his friends. He didn't remember what it meant to be Gumball. And then he understood. Perhaps he had never existed at all. The Lost, The Amazing World of Gumball episode that was never shown on TV. The Patch. It all started like any normal day. Gumball was sitting in class when Bobbert made an announcement. Attention, environment, update 3.6 installed. Reality has been optimized. No one paid attention. Except Gumball. He started noticing strange things. Darwin didn't blink for almost a minute. Teachers were repeating the exact same lines, word for word. On the classroom board, a message appeared. Don't look for the patch. During recess, he saw a student walk through a closed door. Carrie was frozen in midair like a broken animation frame. And then, the seams. Thin white lines in the air like cracks. When you looked away, they disappeared. The next morning, it got worse. His room looked slightly off. The walls were tilted. The sunlight hit the floor at a strange angle. His mom stood at the stove and said, in a flat voice, "Good morning, Gumball. Good morning, Gumball. Good morning." He ran outside. Elmore was frozen. The trees didn't move. Birds were stuck in the sky. On the school wall, he saw it, a black patch pulsing like a wound. Static leaked from its edges. He touched it, and everything went white. He was now in a blank void. Around him floated broken, glitched-out scenes from old episodes. The audio was reversed. Everything pulsed like it was breathing. Then it stepped out of the shadows. It looked like Gumball, but its face was a flickering TV screen, its eyes pure static. It spoke. You weren't supposed to see it. The patch held everything together. Close your eyes. He tried to scream, but couldn't. The world was shutting down from the inside. He woke up at home. Everything seemed normal. Darwin, Mom, school, all fine. But when he looked into the mirror, he had no pupils. His eyes were blank, white. He blinked, and in the mirror's reflection, a white crack formed on the wall. The screen flickers. Patch failure, subject Gumball. In the final shot, Gumball is sitting in the dark. He slowly turns to the viewer and whispers, "Don't look behind you." The screen goes